Hello everyone, thank you so much for tuning in with me, Gloria Celinda. I'm very excited to be with you once more as we continue to reflect on the topic of true personal identity. Today we are reflecting on how dangerous and how costly pretense can be to your true personal identity. Pretending is presenting or to give a false appearance of something, false appearance of being, false appearance of possessing something. And this is coming from the Merriam-Webster dictionary, which I like because it talks about presenting a false appearance of being. And that is what true personal identity is about. It is who you are as a person, how you show up, how you represent yourself, how you speak, how you are, not only outwardly but internally as well. So it's about your whole being, not only physically but spiritually as well. So what makes pretending dangerous? Sometimes we undermine pretense because it can show up in small things, or what we call small things. It can also show up in big things. Pretending can happen for short periods of time. It can also happen for prolonged periods of times. The truth about pretending is that it is deceptive. When one is pretending, they are not being true to themselves. They are also not being true to those that are receiving them in that state of pretense. Each time one steps out of their true self, every time you compromise or you dishonor yourself through dishonoring your own beliefs, your value system, how you would naturally, as you being you, would want to do things, you are actually compromising your true personal identity. So why do people generally pretend? People pretend to fulfill a specific role, to fulfill other people's expectations, to fit in. People can pretend in order to be accepted. People protect themselves when they are acting out of fear. In fact, there is an interesting story in the Bible, in the book of Genesis chapter 12, verse 12 and verse 13, and it is a story of Abraham with his wife Sarah. I'm reading from the New King James Version. It says, "Therefore it will happen when the Egyptians see you, that they will say, 'This is his wife,' and they will kill me, but they will let you live. Please say you are my sister, that it may be well with me for your sake, and that I may live because of you." You could ask yourself whether that pretense was warranted or not. That's the thing about pretending. We always find reasons to justify why we do things we ought not to be doing. There is always going to be a good reason in one's eyes that necessitates the pretense itself. But is it something that you should be entertaining? If you are working on your true personal identity, if you want to be known in a specific way for your own name's sake, pretending does not serve you. Pretending can become costly to you. In fact, if you read further down this story, and also in chapter 20, you realize that the consequences of Abram were negative. Pretending can show up, as I mentioned, in the smallest things, but it can also show up in big things, where it is very common in relationships. Friendships, you find that people pretend to one another because they want to be liked, they want to be accepted. In schools, we hear a lot about peer pressure, where there are cliques, there are groups, and it's want to belong. We are designed to seek belonging as human beings. So it is quite common in relationships, and it can be in one-on-one relationships, or it can also be in relationships with groups because of this wanting to belong. In marital relationships, it's an interesting one because for the first few days of the parties could be pretending. It is not true in every case, but it is quite common. Talking further on marital relationships, when you find people that are married, they learn to compromise because they want their relationships to work. They compromise sometimes their interests, their hobbies. Sometimes they compromise even their true selves, especially when it comes to wives. It doesn't only happen with wives, but I think it is quite common with wives. And it is sometimes covered in this concept of submission. Submission is intended to be done in a loving manner, in a sincere manner, but somehow we are groomed, or as women culturally, to do specific things and to behave in a certain manner in order to please the husband. Where else do we find pretending? Commonly in jobs, in workplaces. People pretend in the roles that they take up. Sometimes there are industries that are quite pressurizing. There are industries that people find themselves in where the role requires one to perform certain duties, and you find that this is not something that you would prefer to be doing. Let me use an example. People in sales, you find people that are just born to be salespeople, and you find other people who do the job because that's where they find themselves at that point in time, and naturally they would not want to socialize, they would not want to build relationships, and depending on the industry that one is in, you find that there is a need to build relationships and to sustain these relationships and going to events and so forth. And it requires that person to step out of their natural preference. Sometimes we take pretending for granted because it can show up in the smallest things. Like if somebody says, "Do you want to eat this kind of food?" Yeah, it's fine. Meanwhile, it's something that you do not really prefer. And it happens continuously. It happens over a prolonged period of time to an extent that you even forget the type of food that you like because you have said yes to someone else's choice just to avoid conflict. Sometimes wearing clothes that you are not your style because someone disapproves of your style. And it goes on again, and this happens in close relationships, and it's things that would go on for prolonged period of time. Sometimes you go to places that you would rather not go to because you want to not disappoint the other person, you want to please the other person. So pretending can be an everyday thing, and it really shouldn't be, because when you are pretending every single day, when you are pretending with the closest relationships, you must know that you have compromised your true personal identity. Sometimes one pretends so much that they even lose a sense of who they are. How will you know whether you are pretending or not? When you are suppressing your own voice in decisions, in the choices that you are making. When you are suppressing your own voice in the interest of pleasing somebody else, then you must know that you are pretending. It could be that it's something that has happened over a prolonged period of time. It is still pretending. It is still self-deception. It is still costly to your true personal identity. It is still costly to who you are. Many a times you find that when things go wrong with a specific choice, the one who has been pretending will be saying, "I didn't even want to go there," or "that was not my choice." Remember, one of the reasons that we honor our true personal identity is so that we can be free to live authentically as human beings. There is another passage of scripture in the book of John, chapter 8, verse 32. This verse specifically says, "And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." So the context of this from the Bible is quite deeper than just talking about pretending. It is talking about knowing the truth of being a disciple, knowing the truth of who you are in Jesus Christ as a disciple of Jesus Christ. But what is important to understand about the concept of knowing the truth and the truth setting you free is that when you are living in your authentic self. You are living in the truth of who you are. Before I go any further, I do want to pause and appreciate every one of you who continue to tune in. Thank you for your support. Thank you to each one of you who has subscribed so far. If you haven't subscribed as yet, please click the subscribe button and urge all of you to please share the link with others so that we can learn and grow together. One of the main objectives of my reflections is to bring awareness. So the call to action for you is to identify areas, identify relationships where you think there is an issue of pretending, where you know you are not free to be yourself fully, to think about the cost of not addressing your pretense, and not only in the short term but in the long term. Once you've identified the areas and once you have thought about the cost of not fixing the issue at hand, you will have enough motivation to start confronting those relationships, confronting the individuals that you need to. Sometimes you even need to confront yourself. Until next time, thank you very much for tuning in.